Nasty, nasty, nasty work, Tiffany Hayes. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You are pushing for physical harm and violence on Caitlin Clark because she busted your you-know-what in a basketball game that you was doing a lot of trash talking into. This is nasty work.
There's a major difference between intense basketball rivalry and behavior that crosses into off-court territory with real legal, professional, and organizational consequences. Trash talk, physical play, and emotional moments are part of the game. Leagues already have rules, referees, and disciplinary systems in place to manage those situations. But when a verified professional athlete publicly interacts with content involving threats or references to off-court harm against another individual, the situation moves into a completely different category, one that involves league offices, legal departments, team executives, corporate sponsors, and public accountability. For weeks, the Indiana Fever storyline has centered around questions surrounding coaching decisions, front office management, and organizational transparency. But now, the focus has shifted entirely. This controversy involves social media conduct, public responsibility, and how the WNBA chooses to enforce standards in the digital age. And that raises a much larger question about consistency, accountability, and what the league's disciplinary priorities actually are. Welcome back to Court Central. Today, we're taking a careful, evidence-based look at the Tiffany Hayes social media controversy, what was documented publicly, why it matters institutionally, and what the WNBA's response could reveal about how the league handles player conduct compared to coaches, executives, and other high-profile figures. This analysis is not about spreading or repeating harmful content. We are not amplifying threats or inflammatory language beyond what is necessary for context. Instead, we're focusing on the professional implications of a verified athlete publicly engaging with controversial content online, and what obligations that creates for the WNBA, the Golden State Valkyries organization, and the Players Association moving forward. The timing also matters. This comes during the same period in which the league reportedly disciplined Stephanie White over public criticism of officiating. That comparison is impossible to ignore. If coaches face immediate consequences for comments directed at officiating, then observers are naturally going to ask how the league plans to respond when a player becomes connected to content involving far more serious implications. The consistency of enforcement is now part of the story itself. So before opinions take over the conversation, let's establish the timeline, separate speculation from verified facts, and break down exactly what has been documented so far.
I cannot believe Tiffany Hayes went on social media and did this. So there was people in the social media world, and there's weirdos out there, okay, that Caitlin Clark's had a stalker already. So these things are to be taken serious, regardless if you want to or not. We watched someone get arrested for stalking this woman, okay?
The on-court exchange set the stage for everything that followed, and that context matters. During the Indiana Fever's 90-82 win over the Golden State Valkyries, Tiffany Hayes and Caitlin Clark were involved in a heated competitive moment that included close physical pressure and verbal back and forth designed to disrupt Clark's rhythm. Clark answered with a deep three-pointer from well beyond the arc, then responded verbally herself, turning the sequence into one of the game's defining moments. After that exchange, Hayes struggled to regain momentum offensively, and the Valkyries eventually lost by 8. Those are simply the documented game facts. But the bigger issue didn't stay on the court. The real controversy began afterward, when social media activity tied to Hayes sparked broader questions about professionalism, league standards, and organizational accountability. That's where this stops being just another intense basketball moment and becomes a much larger institutional conversation.
And then another person said, listen, I got some cousins. We don't need to speak about that. We'll ride at dawn upon request. Just let me know. So this person is saying, I got some cousins that'll do physical harm and commit to violence on Caitlin Clark that has nothing to do with on the court. You're talking about harming someone violently off the floor in their regular day-to-day lives. This is nasty, regardless if this person is serious or not. As a you should not be entertaining this. You should not be laughing and kikiing and ha-haing and pushing for this, Tiffany Hayes. This is nasty work. Tiffany Hayes puts "that's real" with the crying face. It's not funny that you...
In the hours after the game, the situation moved beyond basketball and into much more serious territory. According to widely circulated screenshots and reports, Tiffany Hayes interacted with social media posts in her mentions that use phrases like crash out, language commonly associated with losing emotional control and escalating conflict. On its own, that kind of online trash talk might have remained part of the usual chaos surrounding high-profile sports discourse. But one specific exchange changed the conversation entirely. A fan posted a message that went far beyond basketball rivalry, explicitly referencing the possibility of physical harm toward Caitlin Clark outside the context of the game itself. The wording was direct enough that there was little ambiguity about what was being implied. This was no longer about aggressive defense, competitive intensity, or heated emotions during play. It referenced real-world violence involving a named individual away from the court. What elevated the controversy further was Hayes' reported response to that message. She replied in a way that appeared to validate or encourage the comment, adding language suggesting it was real, along with an emoji interpreted by many as amusement. That interaction was quickly screenshotted, shared across social media, and reframed the discussion from sports rivalry into questions about professional responsibility, player conduct, and how leagues respond when online engagement crosses into potentially dangerous territory.
Tiffany Hayes, this is nasty work. Tiffany Hayes puts "that's real" with the crying face. It's not funny that you are pushing for this. The WNBA needs to come out and suspend her ass right away. Okay, a fine isn't enough. She needs to be fined and suspended immediately. There's no way she...
The institutional implications of that interaction require careful analysis. In a publicly visible and archived exchange, Tiffany Hayes responded positively to content that explicitly referenced off-court physical harm toward a named individual. She did not report the post, distance herself from it, or publicly reject the language being used. Instead, her response was interpreted by many viewers as approval or encouragement, reinforced by the tone of the reply and the accompanying emoji. That distinction matters because this moves beyond basketball competition or online trash talk. Once a verified professional athlete engages with content involving threats of real-world harm, the issue enters a completely different category involving player safety, organizational responsibility, corporate image, and potential legal concerns. This is no longer about rivalries, hard fouls, or emotional exchanges during games. It becomes a question of how professional leagues and teams handle public conduct tied to threatening language. The situation also carries additional weight because Caitlin Clark has previously been the subject of documented security concerns and stalking-related incidents that required intervention. That history changes the context significantly. When public figures with major platforms appear to engage casually with comments about off-court harm directed at someone who has already faced safety issues, the reaction is naturally going to be more serious and more scrutinized. Following the backlash, Hayes reportedly began blocking accounts that were criticizing or reposting the interaction. Critics argued that this did little to address the core issue itself. From their perspective, removing visibility of the criticism did not resolve the larger concerns surrounding the original engagement or the broader conversation about professional accountability in high-profile sports environments.
Look at this, at WNBPA, at Kathy Engelberg, at WNBA Commish, at WNBA. Hope you do something about Tiffany Hayes inciting hate with fans on social media and inciting violence. Violence, you guys.
The biggest question now is consistency. Earlier this week, the WNBA quickly fined Stephanie White for criticizing officiating. The league acted fast, made it public, and showed that coaches can face consequences for their comments. Now the league is facing a much more serious situation involving a player publicly engaging with content connected to off-court harm toward another player. And many fans are asking the obvious question. If the league moved that quickly over officiating comments, how will it respond here? This matters because the WNBA is growing fast with new sponsors, TV deals, and betting partnerships. The league has to show that it can handle serious situations consistently and professionally. The Players Association also has a responsibility here because both Caitlin Clark and Tiffany Hayes are league members, and player safety has to matter equally for everyone involved. At this point, many people believe the league needs to respond publicly in some way before the next Fever versus Valkyries game. Whether that's a statement, warning, or disciplinary action is up to the WNBA, but silence will only increase the controversy. For Hayes personally, critics believe the clearest path forward would be a direct public acknowledgement that interacting with the content was inappropriate and should not have happened. More than anything, this situation highlights a bigger issue for the WNBA. As the league grows bigger commercially, the standards around social media conduct, player accountability, and public communication also need to become stronger and more consistent.